This begins, like all good jokes, with a date and a banality, November 24th, 1971, Thanksgiving Eve. A quiet flight from Portland to Seattle. Just some guy with dark sunglasses and a business suit as grey as his life. The story is told as the audacity of a criminal, but believe me, you are not prepared to understand what really happened that day. D.B. Cooper was not a thief. He was a failed experiment of reality, a subject who found the exit button and decided the show was over. The first act of this farce, you remember it, was the note. The bastard sits in seat 18C, orders a whiskey, and hands the flight attendant, Florence Schaffner, a folded piece of paper. She ignores it, assuming it is a phone number. What sweet stupidity. The biological innocence of the crew is the first victim of this story. When she finally reads the message, "I have a bomb in my briefcase," the bureaucratic machinery sets in motion. The FBI, that collection of peanut brains, assumes the narrative. Airplane hijacking, a criminal, a list of demands. For parachutes, $200,000 in untraceable bills. Untraceable. Do you think the universe allows loose ends? Please. The money was the bait for the police to accept the false categorization of the event. A simple heist. The immediate impact was, of course, national shame. Overnight, the sky of the United States turned into a joke. A single man? A guy with a cheap suit and a polite note? Brings civil aviation to its knees. The psychological trauma for the industry was so deep that they had to invent an entire new branch of air security, the TSA, which is itself another grotesque joke. They had to secure cockpits, install detectors. Oh, for what? For the mental incapacity to accept that a man without violence or blood simply decided to leave. Your faith in stability is a symptom. The criticism here is not about the ineptitude of the FBI. That is obvious. It is their business model. The criticism is for you, for us, for accepting the narrative of the hijacker. Cooper did not hijack the plane. He hijacked our attention. He forced us to look at the possibility that the rules of society and physics are, at their core, a personal choice. The system focused on the bomb, the threat, the money, never on the final act, never on the dissolution. What kind of threat is a man who has already given up his own life? He is not a threat to the plane. He is a threat to causality. The true horror began when the plane landed in Seattle and he sat down to negotiate calm smoking. He was not part of that equation of greed. He was having his last drink before disappearing from geometry. The clock struck around 8:13 p.m. when D.B. Cooper, with the coldness of someone stepping out to buy cigarettes, jumped from the tail of the Boeing 727. The leap took place over southwestern Washington, a zone that, at that moment, was biological hell. Freezing rain, clouds at 10,000 feet, and a temperature that shredded your lungs. The idiots in the press called it a daring jump. It was a stylish suicide with a forged death certificate. The most grotesque example of futility is what was found in the cabin after the plane, with the crew in shock, finally landed. What did the criminal genius leave behind? 2 parachute straps and a damn clip-on tie? Do you realize a shitty tie, the only relic, the only museum piece of his non-existence, is a garment used to pretend to be a responsible adult? The tie was analyzed by the fools in the lab. They looked for prints, hairs, DNA. What they didn't understand was that they were analyzing an empty cocoon. The search operation that followed was a monumental waste, christened Project Cooper. Hundreds of FBI agents, National Guard, civilians, combing every inch of the Lewis River Basin. The impact? Mockery? The cost, estimated in millions of dollars at the time, was an investment in national denial. The US government could not tolerate that a civilian had broken the rules of physics and law. The search wasn't to find Cooper. It was a ritual of exorcism to prove that reality was still intact. Your hope is only background noise. The horror of this case is the dismantled corporeality. At that speed, the fall is not gentle. It's a thermal evisceration. Wind at 300 kilometers per hour is not air. It's a solid mass that hits you, cracks your bones, rips off your skin, and freezes your organs. Cooper didn't die on impact. He died in the process. The true horror is that his consciousness, his self, did not extinguish. It transferred. It fused with the air, with the acid rain, with the storm itself. The idiots were searching in the mud. It's fucking ridiculous. What did they expect to find? Body? No? They expected to find certainty, and Cooper stole even that from them. He proved it is possible to leave this body behind, and that the only relic is a cheap tie that disgusts you to touch. The most delicious, the most cynical part of this file came almost a decade later, February 10th, 1980. A family, the Ingrams, were in an area known as Tina Bar, on the banks of the Columbia River. A 5-year-old boy, Brian Ingram, was playing in the sand and found something that looked like rotten paper, tied with aged rubber bands. The most perfect example of the universe's selective memory. The finding was 3 bundles of $20 bills, marked by the FBI with serial numbers that matched Cooper's ransom. The impact analysis? The media explosion was instantaneous. Eureka! The money was the definitive proof. Cooper had died, swept away by the current. The money had survived a 24-kilometer journey downstream. The law of conservation of mass has been restored. What a relief for the collective psyche. People needed the money to appear in order to justify the search. The money, the inanimate object, became the only reliable witness of the catastrophe. But here's where you have to laugh. How is it possible that the bills, paper, survived erosion, mud, moisture, and not a single bone, not a single fragment of the parachute, not a single tooth of the man appeared next to them? Was Cooper made of paper more fragile than his own ransom? Your body is not a reliable storage. My critique is that those bills are a biological sample from another universe. They are not remains of a failed crime. They are the organic waste of a successful transfer. Cooper left his anchor so that reality could eventually locate it and, hopefully, stop searching for him. It is the final mockery, the irony of sacrifice. The only tangible proof that the event happened is the dead matter he considered expendable. Reality was forced to vomit the bills in order to seal the wound, but the man, the real problem, was gone, and the fact that a child found it is the cherry on the cake. The future of the investigation in the hands of a kid, the FBI never recovered from that affront. The search became a ghost hunt funded by the taxpayer. The case was officially suspended by the FBI in 2016. They didn't close it, they suspended it. It's like saying a patient is in an indefinite coma. This, I assure you, is the non-verbal admission of defeat. The impact on the psychology of the nation is enormous. Cooper became the perfect anarchist, the outlaw who cannot be captured, not because he is intelligent, but because he doesn't exist in the same frame of reference. He is the black hole of justice. The most pathetic example of this psychological impact is the constant flow of false confessions. Dozens of men over the decades have claimed responsibility for the hijacking because people need to believe that Cooper was caught, or at least that he became just another mortal who desires recognition. The public cannot bear the idea of absolute silence. They need a face, a story, a failure. It's your mind, yours, that demands closure, the bold, the end. And Cooper systematically denies it to you. Certainty is a terminal disease. The real horror here, the critique no one wants to admit, is the failure of causality. Physics and the law tell us that every action has a reaction, that every object must be accounted for. Cooper is the quantum crack. He proved that with enough will and contempt for survival, you can violate the fundamental laws of the universe. The fact that the file remains open is a constant reminder that your life, your belongings, your borders are only suggestions that someone with enough audacity can discard. The FBI, with its diagrams and its 4 models, is the embodiment of the fear that the universe is random, and Cooper is the proof that it is. The fascination is not for the money, it is for the liberation. He is the embodiment of the idea that you can simply disconnect, turn off the monitor, and that no one, not even the most powerful police force in the world, can do anything about it. The terror is that this switch exists, and that he used it successfully. The question that truly terrifies you is not where Cooper is, but rather, why haven't I jumped yet? Not out of envy, but out of the repulsion to the routine that he rejected with such violent aesthetics. let's talk about the mockery of planning. The flight, Victor 23, the air corridor that the 727 was supposed to follow. 8:13 at night, the exact hour of the jump. People analyze it as a criminal strategy. It is not. It is a ritual coordinate. Cooper wasn't seeking a geographic point. He was seeking the exact point of the dimensional intersection that only opens at certain altitudes, under certain atmospheric pressures. The plane was not a means. It was the pressure chamber. The most grotesque example we have is that fragment of tie which we already mentioned, but we must revisit it. It is not wool. It is a contaminated material. The investigators noted that the tie contained titanium and traces of chromium, rare elements, typical of high-tech environments or industrial processes. The criticism of the time was that he could have been an aerospace engineer. What a depressing thought. The tie did not contain traces of his work. It contained traces of his destiny. Titanium and chromium are the residues of the outer membrane that he crossed. The tie is the first example of discarded matter from another reality. The veil is only fabric. The impact analysis here is that the act of the fall was, in reality, an act of violent ascension. He did not fall. He was pulled by the force of the void. Think of the jump as a transfer of information. Cooper did not take his body to a new place. He took his consciousness and left the biological shell behind, along with the tie and the money. The true project was not the ransom, it was the shedding. And the evidence, though crude and corroded, is telling you that gravity is not a principle. It is an anchor you can release. You are the flesh that will be discarded. The final critique of this section is the most fucked up. The FBI spent decades looking for a body. They were looking for the remains of a man who, at the moment he jumped, became an inorganic entity that now floats in the ether of annulment. They were searching for a failure. He gave them a successful metamorphosis. The tie is the witness of his birth in another form, and you, by reading this, are touching the same contaminated matter, allowing Cooper's frequency to filter into your own perception of mass. The legacy of D.B. Cooper is a cynical and constant reminder of the fragility of human infrastructure. The Boeing 727, that majestic metal tube, had such a stupid weakness that no one considered it until Cooper exploited it. The rear air stair. The design allowed it to be opened in mid-flight. The example of the industry's reaction was the Cooper vane, or Cooper blade, a mandatory modification introduced immediately after 1971. It was a safety device that prevented the stair from opening in the air. The industry, with massive expense, admitted that Cooper had identified a systemic vulnerability that transcended security. They were not correcting a design flaw. They were trying to seal a cosmic wound. It was a pathetic attempt to put a patch on reality. The patch is already falling off. The final critique, and this is where the fear becomes personal, is that the solution was purely physical. They closed the airplane door. Do you think that Cooper, after having defied gravity and the law, is limited by a metal lever? Please. He merely demonstrated that the exit option exists. And the fact that the FBI has suspended the case is the ultimate surrender. The system cannot catch what is no longer physical. The defeat is so complete that the only action left is surrender. Your bones are only a temporary prosthesis. Cooper became the frequency of nothingness. He is the shadow pattern that proves that the life you lead, work, taxes, future plans, is an option. And the other option is glorious dissolution. He is not a criminal, but a nihilist prophet warning you. You are also on the plane. You are in the cabin, strapped by the seatbelts of routine. Look out the window. The darkness is making you an offer. The terror is that now that you know, every time you feel the cold wind or see a stock chart plummeting, you will remember the true secret of the jump. It was not greed, it was the absolute need not to be. And the air, the damned air you breathe, is no longer harmless. It is the vehicle he used to leave you behind. Take a picture of your face. It will be the last memory. The legacy of D.B. Cooper is the fracture of your will. The case is not in the file. It is in your head, and he is waiting for you to take the spare parachute, the one you know doesn't work, and to make the jump into the void that he sarcastically showed you is the only happy ending. The bastard got away with it, And you who keep reading
are his last victim.